So hi, Katie here again. I've got my extensions in today. I bought some golden brown extensions to match my new hair colour, so I'm really pleased with them. So today I want to talk about transphobia in the UK and how the UK establishment in particular has become so transphobic. Um, I mean, compared to other countries, a lot of the sectors of society who aren't transphobic in other countries tend to be transphobic in the UK. And so I just wanted to look at that and try and explain maybe why they're like that. So, well, first off then, I've got my little notes. I've made some notes here. The UK's transphobia has been, it's been something that's been noted in other countries, particularly, in the USA. For instance, our media is very transphobic and it has a long history of transphobia. And when The Guardian, a couple of years ago, they sort of signed some kind of um, petition, in favour of the gender critical people, or the TERFs, quote unquote, as they don't like being called. I'll get my hair out of the way there. Well, I'm hopeless at this. It's nice to have lots of hair, but I'm never entirely sure what to do with it. Oh, but yeah. The Guardian, for instance, their editorial. It was actually editorial that actually stuck up for extremist transphobic groups, and like a week later, the Guardian's sister paper in the UK, in the USA, actually kind of disassociated themselves from the comment, because in the USA the media tends to be pro-trans, but in the UK the media, or most of the media, is kind of alt-right, talks from an alt-right perspective, or at the very least a very conservative perspective. Um, Papers like the Daily Mail, for instance, that's notorious as being against, it has a long history of being against LGBT rights, and they're like almost sort of Thatcherite maybe in their outlook still. Um, the Sun is kind of like a right-wing paper. They're very right-wing again. They can be really racist, obviously sexist. Up until recently, they devoted one page of their newspaper, page 3, to a nude female model, or a topless female model. With corny headlines like, for instance, if it was like this time of the year, Christmas, it would say so and so, let's say Katie, because I don't want to offend anyone. Katie is a ripe little Christmas cracker, or something like that. They are absolutely sexist and completely ridiculous. And but they're transphobic. The Mirror is like a left-wing kind of tabloid paper, but that's sort of transphobic as well. They famously, they in recent years, they've kind of had headers on their paper. This is the Mirror now, along where the headline is. They've had stuff around Pride time of the Mirror's proud to support Pride, but a few years ago they actually sort of had headlines like, using the T word to describe trans people who'd been murdered. So yeah, so they're pretty bad. And the Times as well. The Times never used to be particularly transphobic. It was always the main paper that was the main respectable paper that was respected all over the world. and since being taken over by Rupert Murdoch, it went from being a broadsheet to a tabloid, and it is literally, the last couple of years, its transphobia has sort of like gone out the window. You know, it's completely out of control. They've had literally, you know, in the last year or so, a transphobic article, or maybe even 2 or 3 transphobic articles each day in their paper, with headlines such as trans lobby sacrificing children, which is extremely disturbing. You know, as somebody who's got like partly Jewish heritage, I just find that really sounds a little bit too much like medieval blood libel to me, um, albeit directed at a different minority. And I know they're only talking metaphorically, presumably, but a lot of people just see the headline and they just read the headline and it goes in sort of subliminally or whatever, or subconsciously. So yeah, so you've got papers like that, and they've had a long history of transphobia. I mean, years ago, they would, anybody who was trans, you know, you could be in any particular profession, you come out as trans and you start your gender reassignment, and it would be in the paper, you know, particularly if you were in what was seen as an archetypal sort of male role, such as a police officer. You know, it would say something like, you know, if you were a police officer, it would say something like top Met cop in sex swap shock or something like that on the front. And very often they force people out of their jobs, you know, or they cause employers to actually say to people who are transitioning, oh, well, we won't, you know, we're going to have to fire you because of what the papers will say or the media attention. So yeah, so the newspapers are bad. They haven't got the sensationalist value that they once had, about trans people now, because we're much more common and we're much, you know, a lot of us are out of the closet, and they can't really paint us all as, you know, kind of middle-aged anymore, because a lot of younger trans people are out as well and out of the closet, so they can't, I mean, they can't really put us in a certain category, you know. So what they do now is they kind of get in the gender critical, turfy, I won't call them feminists, but the anti-trans activists, and they're kind of promoting their ideas and talking about them, you know, having their freedom of speech taken away by when anybody tries to demonstrate against their views at universities. Um, and obviously J.K. Rowling as well is now a cause célèbre of many of these papers that were actually quite right-wing. So, I mean, it seems the only kind of feminism, inverted commas, that they like is feminism which is actually attacking trans women. I mean, if they don't give much time to the feminists who actually criticise cis-het male violence and discrimination against everybody, you know, they prefer, you know, that's the kind of feminism they like. Their views wouldn't be printed if they weren't against trans women and trans girls, and, you know, often trans men as well now, and non-binary people. Um, so yeah, and having said that the majority of the papers in the UK are right-wing, the mainstream papers, actually we're getting it from the left wing as well. The Morning Star is very transphobic. They think that they're being radical feminists by doing it, but you know, by kind of preaching against trans people, or transgender ideology as they call us, our views, you know. They just think we're an ideology. They literally just think we're an ideology and not a random assortment of human beings who just happen to be trans. You know, they just cannot see that we're people's daughters, brothers, sisters, work colleagues, friends, partners, parents. They can't see that, you know. They just see us as one malignant political entity. But yeah, the Morning Star, they actually had a really transphobic cartoon back about a year ago, which depicted as a trans woman in a female space as a crocodile or something, something like that, with big sharp teeth, basically as a predator, in pretty much the same way that Nazi publication during the Third Reich would have depicted Jewish people like me, which is, I mean, it's really awful. I mean, I swear some of the things that I see in the British newspapers, I've kind of studied history and that period of history as well in Germany, and I look at it and I think, well, how can that, did they actually lift this from Third Reich propaganda, and instead of applying it to Jewish people, they applied it to trans people? I literally see that, particularly the fox in the hen house analogy and that kind of thing, and picking somebody, a trans person who has committed a crime, and putting transgender in the headline. Would they do that for cisgender people? I mean, if a cisgender person robbed a bank, would they say cisgender woman robs bank? But if it's a trans woman, you can bet it'll be, if it's fraud, it'll be transgender woman commits fraud. And the fact that the person is transgender is neither here nor there. It's as significant as if the person is cisgender. But when you're transgender, they will put your trans status on the headline, and then they will go off very often into some kind of tangent about oh, so and so used to be called such and such a name, so they will dead name the person in the article completely needlessly, and then they will probably even show an old pre-transition picture of the person, whereas the whole article was about somebody who committed fraud or a bank robbery or an assault. But yeah, so that is the kind of mentality that we've had, in the UK in the newspapers day in, day out for like the last couple of years. They've just been kind of forcing this sort of basically transphobic agenda, demonizing trans people, spreading malicious misinformation time and time and time again. And so it's no wonder now that a lot of organizations and these high court rulings are coming out, and politicians are coming out as well, where they're actually ruling against trans rights, because they're afraid of the media, because the media in the UK is extremely powerful, and it's a media that's only owned by about 6, 7 people, maybe even less, and they're mostly, I think they're all sort of white, cis-het, kind of elderly males, so they don't even represent the population, but their kind of vision of the world is in these newspapers and online as well now. I mean, the good news is that we have social media now, so print media is kind of dying in a way, but they still exert quite a bit of influence. I mean, um, journalists from these papers, and I use the term advisedly in a lot of cases, journalists, inverted commas, I would say, are invited onto news programs like Sky News and Channel 4 News, and particularly BBC's Newsnight. And the BBC itself is a transphobic institution. It literally, apparently, it has 4% of trans employees, but not one trans presenter. I think several people have left the BBC who are trans, citing transphobia within the organisation. Also, there's I'm sure, yeah, that there was also something in the news a couple of years ago about younger employees at the BBC being shocked by the transphobia of older employees, the militant transphobia. I mean, apparently a lot of older employees are TERFs, a lot of senior employees are TERFs. They are literally obsessed with trans people. So yeah, so we have that, and we have it on the radio. They like programs like Women's Hour, they will afford lots and lots of airtime to organisations like Fair Play to Women, Fair Play for Women. You know, they will literally, they the British media, both the print media and the sort of a lot, you know, the BBC and some of the other people in the media as well, on sort of like shows like Channel 5, you know, morning shows, Piers Morgan, they're very, very transphobic. You know, they are very transphobic, and they will literally, if it's a talking show, you know, where they have people phoning in and it's a discussion show, they will literally whip up transphobia. They will repeat what has been, you know, in the Times or the Mail or the Sun, you know, all the lies that have been in those newspapers, they will repeat them and literally kind of goad people into phoning up, you know, and sort of, and to give a transphobic opinion. So they don't, I mean, a lot of the time they won't feature trans people on their programs, and actually a lot of trans people won't go on their programs because because of the fact that they know that the whole show will be loaded against them. You know, I mean, it's like so yeah. So we have the media. I've talked at length about the media, and I mean, we also have sections of academia that are transphobic, mainly the arts and humanities. Surprisingly enough, I work for an engineering firm, and you would think that, I mean, engineering, construction, professions like the army, the police, you would think they would be transphobic because they're traditionally kind of cis-het male dominated professions, but actually they, you know, although they were cis het male dominated historically, they've changed quite a bit in the last couple of decades. Um, but strangely enough, you know, like science, I mean, science has encouraged a lot of women engineers, and a lot of, you know, women scientists has been kind of drives to do that. But with the arts and humanities, they were tended to have more female academics, and more female sort of kind of researchers in those fields, but they seem to be very transphobic because a lot of um, female academics, such as like in philosophy and like English lit, unfortunately a lot of senior female academics are gender critical, feminists, inverted commas, as well. So yeah, so that's rife at a lot of the universities, and there's a big disconnect between the actual students who are very pro-trans and the lecturers who can be quite transphobic, you know. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them are, too many of them. I worked at the university, and this was a while ago, and I actually got fired from my job for being trans. So yeah, I know that I thought it would be a tolerant atmosphere, but no, because trans people were not liked. You know, they couldn't get away with it now, but a few years ago they could get away with it. So so yeah. So I mean, the judiciary, yeah, the judiciary is transphobic, I believe. You know, I've seen far too many I followed far too many court cases in papers to kind of believe, you know, to kid myself that the judiciary doesn't have a transphobic streak running through it. I mean, there was a recent case where the trans man who wanted to be named as father of his child was refused that by the High Court, which seems to me to be extremely mean. There was the other case where non-binary people were refused to have X on their passports, like in other countries. So again, another completely mean thing to do that, you know, would not have any effect on any other people. you know, unless they were non-binary. But I mean, no, they decided to do that to non-binary people just to kind of assert their authority, to assert the authority of you can either be male or female and that's it. So they just wanted, you know, it was just a way to try and just erase non-binary identities. So yeah, so there was that. There's I mean, and the most recent case, obviously the Kira Bell case, where they ruled that young trans people under the age of 16, and actually between the ages of 16 and 18, are unable to give informed consent. So to having puberty blockers. So yeah, so that's another example. So the judiciary is transphobic, and I do know there are some really high up people in the judiciary, you know, solicitors and judges who are very transphobic. So, and also politics in the UK, politics is transphobic. Not one political party has actually spoken up in favour of trans rights. The Tories, obviously, you know, they've kind of rolled back trans rights. They promised to reform the Gender Recognition Act. They didn't do it. They went back on it, even though in the consultation, 77% of the British public said that they were in favour of the GRA being reformed and making it easier for trans people to change their the sex marker on their birth certificates. So the government totally ignored that and said no, you know, no, we're going to shelve the reforms. And there's also been talk as well of you know, even kind of restricting access, toilet access for trans people. You know, it's absolutely terrible. And again, a lot of it is driven by the media. The government want to get on the good side of a right-wing media. And so all the scares over gender-neutral toilets, the government sort of actually recently, they sent out a consultation, or they're going to send out a consultation asking if about gender-neutral toilets or something. I don't know. No, actually, I think it was they made a statement to say that they wanted to curtail the kind of growth of gender-neutral toilet facilities in buildings and public spaces. So yeah, because they said to make women feel safe. That was their kind of the excuse that they made. But I'm sure it was kowtowing to the actual UK media, because if they get the media on the wrong side of the media, that's the government finished. The government doesn't listen to the majority of British people in the UK. The government listens to the media and the establishment and the rich people. They don't listen to the ordinary people. They don't listen to 99.9% of the electorate. They listen to the 0.1% who own most of the wealth. So yeah, so yeah, basically politics. I mean, Labour, Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer hasn't come down on the side of trans people. He hasn't. He's been completely silent about transphobia in the Labour Party. The Lib Dems aren't much better, as far as I know. The Greens are full of TERFs as well. A lot of them aren't TERFs, but some of them are TERFs. There's even TERFs in Plaid Cymru. There's TERFs in the SNP, Scottish National Party. It's just terrible, you know. And then obviously we have all these little right-wing parties who are extremely transphobic as well as racist and, you know, hateful of all different kinds of minorities and homophobic. You know, they are just, it is just a mess. And also the healthcare system in the UK, the waiting lists are extremely long. For instance, I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria back in April 2016, and my first appointment at a gender clinic was in December 2019. So it literally takes that long. The waiting list is that long, and it's very difficult for people to get bridging hormones. I was quite lucky because in the end I managed to get bridging hormones, but a couple of my friends, their GPs have refused to give them bridging hormones until they've had their first appointment at the gender identity clinic, which is, for most people, that's 3 years away, if not longer. So yeah, it's very difficult in the UK. Stuff that, you know, in other countries gets passed automatically. Like in Iceland, they kind of recognised trans people's rights to self-ID. You know, you didn't have to have a medical note from doctors, or you didn't have to have a gender recognition certificate to be considered as, you know, the gender that you identified as, or the gender that you presented as, or actually the gender that you are. If you're trans, you didn't have to have you don't have to have a GRC to do that, or you don't have to have any kind of legal sort of approval or medical approval. You can just self-identify, and in Iceland they passed that really easily in their parliament. They passed it in lots of other countries like Germany, Argentina, Ireland. They've done all that. But in the UK, you know, there's this whole toxic uproar, and, you know, it's literally trans people have to prove themselves over again and again and again and again to actually get any medical treatment, you know, for gender dysphoria. And the NHS's recommendation is that anybody who is diagnosed with a condition is receives treatment within 8 weeks. But actually, in the case of gender dysphoria, it's 3 years. It is a mess, you know, and it's not good. The fanatical transphobia of, you know, that's in the UK is kind of, it's been noted by lots and lots of other countries. You know, I mean, it's no accident that some of the foremost transphobes in the world are British. J.K. Rowling, for instance, is a name that kind of rolls off my tongue automatically. It's been noticed. The rest of the world are noticing this. And the interesting thing is, I found personally that people in Wales, at least, are very, very supportive and pro-trans. You know, they're very proactively supportive. I've had wonderful support from people, from my work colleagues, from my you know, people or strangers I meet in the street. They have been so kind and so supportive, and they have gone out of their way, you know, to be sensitive, and, you know, and people, you know, even when they do say something that's possibly the wrong thing, a lot of the time it isn't through malice. It's that they're genuinely curious, and they're not, you know, I mean, I don't mean about people who ask sort of when you having the surgery type of thing, but they're genuinely curious, and they might not have the right sort of vocabulary. They might misgender me sometimes, you know, but they're not, there's no malice in it. They'll very often correct themselves straight away and feel completely mortified that they've actually kind of misgendered me, and when it's not a problem. But yeah, we have this transphobic establishment, and fortunately most of the British public, you know, the English, you know, they don't, I mean, the English are maybe slightly more transphobic, perhaps. You know, I'm not saying all the English, but there seems to be a lot more hard transphobia in England than there is in Wales. But from anecdotally, from some of my friends in England, some of my English transgender friends, they've told me that they've had quite a bit of abuse compared to me. That said, a lot of my friends have had abuse as well here in Wales, and I've had abuse as well. I mean, I was actually attacked once or twice. They didn't really, I mean, there was only one time that somebody tried to physically attack me as an adult, I mean, you know, actually seriously physically attacked me violently. I mean, I've had like sexual harassment and been groped and that kind of stuff, but so have most women. You know, I'm not trying to kind of belittle that. I think it's awful, but you know, that wasn't. Well, it was motivated because you know, in my case, partly because I was trans, because they thought because I was a trans woman, they could be more likely to get away with it. But um, I, you know, it's the establishment. So please, you know, please tell me, you know, if you're in the UK or if you're abroad, please tell me what you think of British transphobia or English transphobia or Welsh transphobia. You know, I mean, I can't really speak. I mean, Scottish transphobia. You know, I mean, I can't sort of really speak, you know, for transphobia in other sort of parts of, you know, the British Isles. But yeah, it's, you know, just please, just, you know, thank you for watching, and I just, you know, please leave feedback, any feedback. I don't censor comments on my threads. I don't believe, you know, I can take abuse. Even if somebody wants to abuse me, I will take the abuse. I won't, you know, I say, but if you have intelligent feedback, whether you agree with me or not, or you know, whether you disagree with me, or if you want to share your experiences of transphobia, or you know, or your opinions, please do let me know below in the comments below down there. So yeah, so thank you again for watching, and I love you all. So cheerio, au revoir.